Alright, cool. I'm trying to see how I want to set this up. So I'm looking at the stream for when questions are coming in so we can respond to those and then still have the our show notes, and I'm looking at you too, so I'm just making sure this is all work. Yeah, I like your additions to the open versus closed list. I was like, I mean, this is some good things. I don't know how much we'll talk about it, but I was like, I'll leave that to you because this is something you really wanted to do. So it's like you probably have some other thoughts for it. Go for it. And I like, yeah, all those make sense. I just couldn't think of them, but yeah, reading them, it's like, yep, yep, yep. Oh, and I did message Kyla earlier to check how to pronounce his name. He was like, okay, Jeremy pronounced it right last time. And he's like, Kai, like Ki, and then La, uh, L, and then I was like, okay, okay. Didn't want to butcher that. Yeah, he joked about that. He's like, yeah, they corrected, they reached out and got it corrected, and then they recorrected it to start saying Kaya. It's like, no, there is an L. Well, that was funny. Yeah. Okay. Wh- What's going on? Mm. That's hilarious.
Over.
All right.
We're on. We're live. Hello, everyone. More technical issues. Yeah, I've got you coming
What we're
through
here for.
the desktop audio, so of course it's gonna be on there. Anyway, all right. Welcome everybody to the second episode of First Five Live. I'm your host, Chaos Theory, and I am joined by my good friend and host, Phil.
Phillycheaz.
Phillycheaz. So, it is the cheese like that doesn't have anything to do with your name, right? It's just
No.
okay.
It was so I grew up a lot going to Philadelphia. So like
Okay.
Philly cheesesteaks. And
Yeah.
then just when I was coming up with a name one time, I was like, okay, yeah, Phil. And then like I like Philly cheesesteaks, so we'll just go with that.
I love Philly cheesesteaks too. They're awesome. Uh can y'all in the chat please let us know if anything sounds weird or off. I found out why my mic was making a weird noise last time and I fixed it. So, should be a much better spot now. So, yeah, so it's the second episode, which means we're doing pretty good as far as Ash's podcast goes. Um, Ashes Reborn podcast, I should say.
And
Hey, Carl,
one for
how's it
two
going?
for one for two for making a second episode of a podcast so far. So
Right.
that's
um,
that's something.
it is something. We're making progress. Um, yeah. So I guess we'll just kind of jump into the intro. I am gonna point out real quick we are going to be interacting with chat a lot more this time around. We're not going to try to save it towards the end because I felt like we lost some people, didn't quite get the interaction we wanted to. So we're just gonna we'll be having the chat up and reading it as we go, and yeah. So feel free to pop in, say hey, and see what's up. So, Phil, we played in a tournament.
Yeah, the Shuffle Bus World Champions. That we've got our first world champion now too. That was
Hmm.
a wild ride for sure.
It
Um,
was, yeah.
so yeah, Kyla won Shuffle Bust Invitational with Odette with Hydras and massive growth on top of that.
Chained
That deck was
cards.
insane.
The chained combo list that we all thought was dead after it was chained.
Hmm.
Nope. He brought it to the most prestigious tournament we have, and he won. It's pretty awesome.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about our decks here in a little bit, and what Shuffle Bus Invitational was like and how it went. And then we're going to get into our main topic, which is pretty exciting. We don't like last time we kind of covered a lot of news and stuff that was happening. There's not as much big stuff going on at the moment, so we are going to talk a little bit about open list versus closed lists, which I guess was kind of spoiled by the title that I put on the stream. So,
It's
yeah,
all right.
no, I think it'll be fun. It'll be a, I mean, this is a topic that I think it's been talked about a bit here and there, but I don't think we've like kind of covered it in full in like a tightly wound up package. So I'm excited for that.
Hmm.
So yeah, you want to get into Shovel Bus Invitational?
Yeah, let's go for it. So, uh, Kyla won it, and then you actually went 4-0 in Swiss
I did.
on.
I pulled a fill.
I did not pull a me. I went 2-2. It was rocky, but I mean, what can you expect when you're playing the top players just immediately? It was a wild ride.
Yeah, it was crazy. I I had obviously a really good tournament. I did not expect it at all. Like I was really nervous going into it. I brought a list that I hadn't like spent as much time testing, but it just seemed like a really strong list. And um, you and I talked a little bit before the tournament about what we were gonna do and like our plans, and we both said, "I hope I don't run into you because your list seems really good." um, but yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the what the meta actually turned out to be. I think it was really interesting. Um, what happened?
Hmm.
Um, so basically, what happened, with the exception of a couple of like kind of outlier lists, is we ended up with like a split 50-50 between like mill decks and decks that were trying to counter mill. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, I feel like that sounds about right. There are a lot of yeah, all the different versions of Mill, in Leo Saria, and then to an extent my deck, and then just a lot of like swing decks that would either go over it or just go wide around it, like yours was doing.
Yeah. The big thing that stood out to me when I looked at the lists, I saw the mill and I was like, we expected, or I expected anyway, I don't know about you, but I expected quite a lot of Ruby Cobra. It's probably one of the better units in the game right now. And I expected a lot of that, and I was just thinking like, how do you beat these decks? Well, you to get though that wall of O2s, um, it's not easy. You can't just like, you know, pop down on Nature's Wrath. Like that's not enough to get through them. So you just kind of have to punch through them. Either punch through them or go around them. And so for that reason, we saw a lot of overkill stuff. There was like tons of power through. A lot of people were on Cerosaurus mount. Um, I don't. Was there an Archosaurus in the? I don't know if there was or not. I almost brought a list with
That's
Archosaurus in
that.
it for that reason, but and then
It's
of course Kaya brought Shining Hydras. with massive growths. So
hmm It's interesting. We were saying how like good Cobra is. But in my game against Mill, I was like, well, Cobra's going to be useless because it's just going to hit a Dove or a Finch. So I just
mhm.
ended up bringing Bears and Mindfall Gals to swing over them because they couldn't block then.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think what happened, in my theory anyway, is that we knew Mill was going to be stronger than it has been. We saw a little taste of how good Cobra is in the last season of Shuffle Bus, and I think there was enough push to like get Cobra into lists and lean into that Mill win condition, either as a backup or a primary win condition, that people were thinking I've got to find a way to punch through, like because I don't want to play
Mhm.
Mill, so I got to find a way to punch through. And I think that's the direction a lot of people went, and obviously it was really successful. Like Kaya won with it, and it was, the Hydra terrifying thing really paid off for him. So, and playing Odette as well, I think was a really good choice because Odette can really beat up on other mid-range decks. It could just pick apart the board and delete units with Sword of Virtue. Like Odette just is the king or queen rather, sorry, of just mid-range beatdown. Like she can win those mirrors. So
Yeah, his deck just like tore me
Hmm.
apart because like I was worried about playing any O2s because Odette will just kill it when it comes out. And he just played it perfectly round one, knowing I'd Water Blast and Gilder a bear, and then he drops a Sonic with root armor, and then I can't kill it. So
yeah,
he just played into like my game plan really well and then just took advantage from there.
yeah. I'm gonna pull up the lists here so we can like look at them. Uh, so I've got them up on the screen right now. So this is Kyla's list. Um, yeah, I mean Frostback Bear for terrifying, and then Summon Shining Hydra for terrifying, and the mass three of massive growth. I mean, I've been playing with a lot of massive growth lately, and even though the card is chained, and even though it does have a lot of it has a lot of answers. There's you can just ping Fester. You're ahead no matter what. Um, any sort of like Phoenixborn um, hard removal, like Sword of Virtue or Fear or whatever, can get rid of it. You could just chump block it sometimes. Um,
hmm
all that being said, it's still amazing how strong it could be to just throw some massive growth in, throw a bear in, and then you've got a win condition. Like
hmm
it's very effective. Um, and I think this list kind of just shows how strong that can be. Yeah, and there's not a lot else either going on. Um, there's the two Sonic Swordsmen and the Raptor Herder. Those are the only allies, which is kind of strange to see that few of allies in a list like Odette's, where she has 3 spellboard and 5 battlefield.
I guess you kind of treat like the Hydra as a pseudo ally too, because it
Yeah,
just drops that. It's like a knight in itself for 3 cost.
yeah.
You just can't recur it like you can the knights.
It's all. This is almost like it's almost just like a different flavor of Mayoni in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
You're making a big thing, you're swinging hard a couple of times, and the rest of your deck is really just trying to force out like control blockers with Lightbringer and use Gilder to ping away things and get rid of stuff, and lots of removal. Call to action to refresh the Golden Veils to protect your threats. Uh, it's sort of a Mayoni deck in disguise.
He just gets to choose what becomes the snake because I
Yeah,
think he even got swings through with some massive butterfly monks a couple times. He hit me with one, so
yeah,
I'm sure he probably hit some other people too.
yeah. The ability to turn literally any unit on your battlefield into a significant threat is a big deal. And I've been playing it with Salamander Monk a lot lately. And it's so
Mhm.
good because you always have a target. There's always a monk or a spirit somewhere. But the really cool thing is when you play it on the Salamander Monk Spirit, it can't be targeted with attacks. So it's really annoying to deal with. Um, yeah, this was really, really solid list. I think um, just a really smart pick, I think.
Mhm.
Um, Kyle's playing a similar list to the one that he won with Snake before with Mayoni. So it's not a big shift for him. And it preys on both of the big meta decks in this tournament. So
Mhm.
you want to go over yours real quick? Talk about what because you took
Yeah.
Aerodel.
Yeah, I
Oh,
took just like modified my Aerodel a little bit with some redirects because I felt like that was just really needed in like a Mayoni matchup or other like big swing decks. I think I jokingly said to you before going in, it's like, okay, well, my four book lists have only ever lost to Mayoni, and there's no Mayoni on the
yep.
list that everyone's bringing, so I'm gonna do great, right?
Right.
Or I'll find out like what a four book list's like weaknesses are, and
Mhm.
yeah, I think that was found out. All of my games are really close, so like it's very beatable in like a lot of matchups. I think like burn if you can just like mainly like keep aggro pressure. I was always on the back foot if they were just like keeping up like pressure against me and then having some burn or more
Mhm.
units that kept coming at me. That's what Kyla did. I lost to JK's Lulu burn.
Mhm.
Um, he just kept getting like salamander monks and raptor herders out, and then just finished me off with some burn. And then in a Brent, my final game against a Brennan, I was down to like 1 health there because
Uh-huh.
it just kept burning me as well, and that was just like super close.
Yeah, that was Scorpio, right? Because they were the only one
Yeah.
to bring Brennan. Yeah, yeah. Scorpio was my first match, and I felt really bad for them because they got the time zones mixed up and had just woken up
Mm.
whenever our match was
Oof.
being. Yeah, and so they were like, I'm really out of it. I'm still waking up, so this is probably gonna be an easy win for you. And to their credit, it was not an easy win for me. Brennan, I think the thing about Brennan is that no matter what, she's always going to have just that insane amount of pressure, and she can just win games, just blowout games. Um,
Mm.
it's a really great pick for when if you're not super sure what else to do. Like you can always bring a list like this Brennan list and just melt people. And it's high variance, I think. You can get shut down pretty easily too, but um, yeah, I like these kind of Brennan. Anyway, enough
Yeah.
about Brennan.
On the other hand, you can just like also draw top of round and do a ceremonial die with final cry, and then you just play a fire archer, spirit burn, final cry for 5 immediate
Yeah,
damage.
exactly, exactly. So, what were some like I see there's a lot of cards in here that are very interesting to me. Uh, so Return to Soil. Tell me about that.
So when I was building this, I just made it off of uh my game plan was to mill them. So I had slotted in Enchanted Violinist, and for the longest time I had Ryle the Meek in there. And then I ended up at the last second, like taking them out, putting Return to Soil in, thinking, okay, they're basically just another ping and then another violinist too, because it'll mill them a card, and then the removing cards from game is a little extra. It doesn't really do too much in most games.
Hmm.
So it was mainly there just to mill that extra card when I needed it.
Yeah. Do you think that the like would you when you were playing these games when you drew Return to Soil, did you ever wish it was just Ryle instead, or
Uh,
or did it actually do what you wanted it to do?
I think it did what I wanted for the most part because I was
Hmm.
going for that mill game plan. I didn't think about how many uh zero attack units I had whenever I would play it, or like in between rounds, but I
Hmm.
probably could have gotten a decent rile off for like 3 or so in some rounds,
Yeah.
um, in some games. But yeah, I think it's just a card that does need a little more testing to see how high you can go with a lot of rile pings.
Yeah. And you've got the excuse me, the reclaim soul in here as well. Uh
Hmm.
just to heal, extend the game a little bit. Aridel's life's pretty low. It's on the lower end.
Yeah, so that's just there for some extra healing. Um, Same for the redirects. But Reclaim Soul is really nice for I have gotten clogged even with an 8 battlefield before.
Wow.
So just like to free up a slot and then you can play another unit in its place when they think you're like tapped out on the battlefield and then swing again.
Hmm.
It can be really nice at times.
Yeah, for sure. And you and I had talked about this before the tournament. Call upon the realms. You are packing 3.
Hmm.
You convinced me to pack 2, and I think it was really clutch. I think for me anyway. Going into a very mill heavy field with a deck where you're running like shadow spirits that cost power dice, or knights and so on. There's not a ton of power costs in my deck, but there's enough to just, that little bit. When you're getting towards most of these games, especially at high level, it really comes down to the last few points. Last few points of damage, last few cards in your deck or whatever. And I thought Call Upon the Realms was really good there. The anti-mill protection and just saving that little bit of life. It's not just that you're changing 3 dice up, it's that you're saving, you know, however many discards. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, what did you think of it? I was really into that card.
For the longest time I didn't think it was like that great. It's like, okay, it can stall your main action, which is great. Um, but
Hmm.
I usually wanted to uh just put some other like either more removal or something to like advance my actual win con in it. But after losing to a couple mill games, uh, and then just like having to meditate too much, I started sliding it in and really found the value of it.
Hmm.
You just have to find the right time to play it in a round so that they don't start pressuring you on board or anything. But it can really help out because a lot of my games I ended with just like either no deck or like 1 or 2 cards in deck, and I had played a Call Upon the Realms or a couple in that game. So it's like without them, I would have decked myself and then taken some damage and might not have been able to pull out a win on those ones.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the stalling a main. Actually, I've come to like really value being able to just push uh, push it back to the opponent without having to pass.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's really good in Herald because Herald, like, you have so much control over the battlefield if you can just stall and wait out and just like take your time, because once they're backed into a corner and they're like, I have to play this big threat right now, or I'm gonna end up in a position where I have to pass. I don't want to pass. um, or like I really want to do this, but I can't. I have to do this right now. Like being able to do that and then get them to commit, and then you mark prey and then kill the big thing or whatever. Um, really good actually. So I think that worked out really well.
Hmm.
Um, is there anything about this list that you would change if you were to play it again, like in the next season or something?
It's hard to say, because and it's also hard just comparing like this turnout to my previous one in SB5. So it's like um I basically just added the redirects, so I don't know uh if I would go back to no redirects or not. I think it would just have to take a little more testing to see if like they're worth it, or if I want like more reclaimed souls or some other tech pieces to put in there.
Yeah. Uh, well, I'll talk about my list just a little bit. Um,
Yeah,
so this is Herbold Warburbolt. I did change the name whenever I ended up posting it finally. I did a big write up, so a lot of this is already written down on the ashes.live page, but um yeah, so the this deck was super good, and I still think it's probably the best deck I've ever made. Um I've been playing around with this
nice.
color spread um a lot, basically for months, for a couple months now. It started in Noah because I wanted to do Gates Thrown Open, and just see how big of a board, how oppressive of a board can I make in round one that is just really difficult to answer efficiently. Like, I think this opening of Lightbringer, Salamander, Shadow Spirit, a Knight, and Gates Thrown Open is maybe currently the most units and stats that you can get on the board in round one. Like
Yeah,
without like some kind of turbo creeper nonsense. It's really hard to match this amount of bodies and stats. And the cool thing is, like normally those type of decks are very vulnerable to AoE, but this deck is not. Because you can slow play every one of these units. You can just take your time, take your time. Salamander Monk buys you a ton of actions. Lightbringer kind of gets rid of their actions because you're forcing them to use their attacks, you know, when they don't want to. Um, and you you can just slow play it. And on top of all that, like I was doing this before in Noah. It was a little bit too glass cannon, and I was struggling with two things. First thing was I was struggling with closing out games. I didn't have much or any burn in the list. In my Shuffle Bus Season 5 deck, I didn't have any burn. Um, so I couldn't close the games out very well, and I couldn't deal with big threats, like big alert bodies that could just block a swarm 3 or 4 times before they die. I couldn't do anything about that. So switching to Herald and having Marked Prey as a free ability, I could still play with that 10 dice, Gates Don't Open, whatever, and having Herald as a free ability to kill any big unit I wanted to, basically, and put on a ton of pressure with the Knight. It just puts it way over the top. Um, you get
yeah. I think Car- Carl brought up a good point. That you can just like not worry about your knight in your openings too, and like that's something I thought when I immediately saw it too, because thinking about all my starts, how plan on like a ping fester. So
hmm
you drop a knight, I ping fester your knight, but then you still get out like 6 more units that I have to deal with, and it's like you just get overwhelmed that way.
yeah, it's very resilient to the typical kind of Knight answers, I think. Running and Corey points out as well that it's 9 units with the spirits, the monk spirits, and
Oh, yeah.
that's true. That's key. And like the and having the main actions from the monks and the spirits is super important because it lets you just stall for a long time. And I'll talk about why that's important in a second. But uh the knight being essentially just it's good, but it's not like essential to your game plan. And
But
if they are gonna first five a removal card to kill your knight, then they're going 1 for 1 with you in a first five opening where you can still play 6 units. Like, okay, kill my knight. Like that's fine. So anyway, that's the primary big open, and it's really oppressive. The other option, which this came late, um, really late in the process, but I realized if there might be matchups where the gates thrown open is not as good. I was thinking about like Sunshield Sentry being able to shut down like going wide, and decks that just wanted to sit there and not do anything, and just wall up. Um, you know, I don't know. I was just thinking there's got to be a second open here when I need to be more aggressive, because the gates don't open one it's a very very slow open. It's swarming, but it's also very slow. If I need to be more aggressive, I needed a different game plan. So I ended up swapping out one of my Sonic Swordsmen for a Battle Seer, which in this color spread lets me go for a double knight opening. So in the double knight opening, you go False Demon, Salamander, Lightbringer, 2 knights. And the cool thing about this open is you're gonna get a crazy strong March Prey Night Trigger no matter what. You can go toe to toe with other night openers really well with this opening, because Lightbringer exhausts, and the one of the knights is gonna act as like an alert body that just kind of sits there and soaks up damage, soaks up attacks. The other knight comes down later with the Mark Prey, and you get the Sonic Swordsman trigger on it, almost guaranteed. Um, it's really hard to answer 2 knights.
Cool. That you're able to figure out like this pivot for like just
Yeah,
your matchups depending on that.
yeah, and that's the key thing here is like you can delay revealing what opening you're going for so many turns with this list. Like you can, because you Lightbringer book, Salamander book, summon both of them. That's 4 main actions. If your
Mhm.
Salamander dies, or if you attack with Salamander, that's a fifth one. Salamander dies, you get to attack again with your Spirit. That's a sixth one. Then nearing like you know the seventh or eighth main action or so, you can play your Sonic Swordsman. Just plop that down as like a defensive play, and they still don't know. You've played 2 books and the Sonic Swordsman, and they still don't know whether or not you're going for Shadow Spirits Gates and then do it all again, or a second night in False Demon. So yeah, it's really hard to first 5 against, I think.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, I think that the rest of the deck is pretty straightforward. It's just really good allies. I think Light Swordsman was super good in this. It works really well with Call Upon the Realms, because you can play Call to fix the die that you need for Light Swordsman, and then Mark Prey. And now you've got your die ready to go, and next turn you just throw it down, attack, and it's got Stalk and does 4 damage, and it kills something for free with Quick Strike.
Yeah,
So
I've been messing around with Light Swordsman a lot lately too, and it's just a really fun, solid card. I feel like that's just a little like underrated or not looked at too much right now.
yeah, I think it's really good, and it's great for just at the end of the round. Like you're coming to the end of the round, you and your opponent have both exhausted all your board and everything, and then you just throw this down at the end and deal 2 more damage, and you have a bigger top of round swing as well.
Mhm.
Um, this deck tends to win with just really overwhelming top of round swings a lot. Um, and yeah, the only thing that I wish I would have changed and done differently is the Reflections of Water was cheeky, and like I don't know what I was imagining this would be for. I just thought maybe there's some weird off scenarios where this might be useful. Like if Snake shows up, I can stop it from growing. But I don't know. It did not come in handy. I always wished it was a third Consume Soul or a third Particle Shield, either one. But yeah, uh, I think this is pretty solid, and it did me really well. I had 4-0 in Swiss, and I lost to Bill in the semifinals, and it was a really really good game. It really just came down to he just spammed out so many Raptor herders. I just couldn't deal with it. um, but yeah, I don't know. That's. Did you want to talk about any other lists here, or do you want to get to our main topic?
We can just get to the main topic. I think we covered the
Okay.
main points of the invitational pretty well.
All right. Let me switch this back over here to the main cam.
Yeah.
All right. So we just got done talking about an open list tournament. Um, let's talk about open versus closed list.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
go ahead. What are your overall thoughts on this?
yeah. So I think this topic is really coming up because we just started playing or finished up Swiss for the Ashes International League,
Yeah.
um, where we first started playing more closed list because all of Shuffle Bus was just all open list before, and it's really just like a really big different dynamic
Mm-hmm.
playing open versus closed. Um, because open lists you can see like everything that your opponent can play. You can know what you have to play around with, but it can also just be like agonizing trying to pick like your first five. With
Mm-hmm.
closed lists, you might not even have your deck ready until like the night of,
Right.
and then you just you sit down, you see what uh deck they're playing against, and then you just play in right then. It's like, okay, this is the five cards I'm going to go into it. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot definitely different in that aspect for sure. Um
Yeah. Uh, are you still there? Sorry, I didn't know if
oh
I
yeah.
lost you. Okay, there you yeah. So one of the things about open lists is that I'll use my Herald deck as an example. I think it's really important to have um, first five pivots in an open list. Be able to do something to tweak your game plan to fit certain matchups because you'll know what they are immediately. You'll know
Mhm.
exactly what you need to watch out for. And when you see a card that you know you have a hard time dealing with, you know you'll be able to first five the answer if you need to. Um, and closed list, it's a whole new world because you can you can look at a dice spread and you can know what is possible, but you don't know what's there. And a lot of times it can be really misleading.
Mhm.
Um, like you can see like a few ceremonial dice and you might think, oh, I need to look out for Fester killing my knights or something or whatever. And then instead, it's some kind of like Sleeping Widow's huge opening, like spam the board with a bunch of units, and then you're like, I did not first five right for this, and then you just get. I speaking from experience right now because I got like deleted by an Aerodel list that swung for 17 on turn 5.
Jesus.
And so it's really interesting. I think the more that the community plays with in a closed list environment, I think the better people will be trained to look at a dice spread and know what to look out for, to be able to read a dice spread better. Which that's always been one of the things I loved about Ashes is like you sit down and you know exactly what resources your opponent's playing with. If you've played Magic the Gathering, you don't really know fully what kind of game plan your opponent's on the first couple turns. It could throw you for a loop. Um I like being able to sit down and like look at an opponent's Phoenixborn and their dice and be able to guess like, okay, kind of know what direction they're going in. But unlike uh in like open lists, you already know exactly what they're up to. It kind of takes all the surprise out of it, which is good for like playing high level competitive Ashes, but it's also kind of not as exciting sometimes. Would you
Hmm.
agree with that?
Yeah, I think I can see that. Like, it's interesting because that is like how a lot of like 1.0 was back in the day, and we just haven't been able to experience it that much um, in Reborn too much with like Shuffle Bus doing open lists so that they can stream and like we can they don't have to like worry about like any decks being streamed, like people finding out and scouting what the cards are in that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, at um, playing with closed lists, yeah, you don't know what to expect, so it's just like a different like mindset, like going into it, like
Hmm.
what could they be bringing? What threats do I need to watch out for?
Right.
Rather than just looking at their list and being like, okay, this is what the most likely how they're going to start. How do I play around it?
For sure. Corey saying knowledge is key in any game, and yeah, for sure. I I brought up the magic thing. I want to expand on that a little bit because I'm not trying to say magic doesn't have that. Um, it, in Ashes, you're picking your first five after you've already seen what your opponent's dice spread and their Phoenixborn are. It's a little bit more. You have more control and more information before you start playing than you do in Magic. That's all I was trying to say. I think kind of splits the closed list Ashes splits the difference between like an open list Ashes and like what Magic is, where you have to figure things out pretty quickly because you don't have much information at the very start. Whereas open list you have all the information. Closed list is kind of in the middle.
Hmm. Makes
Uh,
sense.
John says, so does Philly still play 20 removal in his closed list decks? That's a good question.
I'll have to look at them, but most likely, yeah, the lists are probably still similar in that just running. Okay, here are my books. We'll fill the rest with removal and go from there.
Yeah, I don't think deck building. So here's the thing. I think the key components of what makes an Ashes deck good are still there and closed. You still have to have a game plan. It's still good to have a backup win condition. You are generally first fiving a few summon books because you want that extra flexibility and like extended hand size later in the game. You still need a good combination of threats and removal and allies and so on. Um, yeah, that's still there. But I think in closed lists you can kind of get away with being a little bit more focused on a single first five game plan, or a little bit more. I don't want to say greedy because I think it gives the wrong impression, but you can play things without having to play around everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah. With regards to greedy, I think I understand what you're saying. Like, because uh your opponent's in a closed list isn't going to know like what you're bringing against, so you can like kind of
Hmm.
go all in on a strategy, whereas like if you're in a open list, they could see like or have a general idea that that's the strategy you're going for and can bring something to counter it, which they
Yeah.
might probably wouldn't in like a closed list.
Yeah. And generally the way you construct decks in an open list is you do pack all those answers for those situations. Like you're not like silver bullets all over the place, but you do have generally like the answers for the certain matchups you'd expect to see. Um, but like I think that Aerodel game that I played where they killed me in like 2 rounds, top of round two, is a good example of this. Like I saw the dice spread. I should have thought Widow's Widow's opening is a huge possibility here. I should have seen the ceremonial dice and known there's enough ceremonial here that Widows could be a thing, and I need a plan for that. I could have first fived a Nature's Wrath, or maybe some more allies, a Raptor Herder or something. But instead, what I did was I went like for a 4 book kind of long game plan, and it was too slow. It was just so agonizingly slow against what they were doing, and they were able to just swarm and overwhelm me. Um, and I think that brings up another good point. The difference between open and closed is like open list. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of agonizing over first five choices beforehand. Like you have hang on just a second. Yep. So you have like a week to think about this matchup, and you know their list and you know your list, and it's like you can go. I've had days where I've spent hours thinking about possible shuffle bus openings and like what would be the best choice, and if he picks this then I should pick this, but if what if he picks this, then I pick this, and then he picked that, and like
You can just keep going down that
oh
rabbit hole
yeah.
forever.
You could just spin and spin and spin. Whereas closed lists, you your first five is still very, very important. In fact, it's probably even more important in some ways, because if you do make a mistake, you, it can be devastating. Yeah, I think there's a lot more opportunity for getting blown out in a closed list tournament, I think. Especially because people are going to bring like these really volatile, like all in decks like Brennan, or you know, these ceremonial like super wide things, or maybe you don't see the Gatestone Open coming until it's too late or whatever, and or they just like summon an Archosaurus and they have call to action and root armor, and you're just like, you know, they have the giant unit that is protected a million times and gets refreshed 3 times, and you just get stomped on. So yeah, I think that there's can be high level competition in both of these, but it just the way you prepare ahead of time for your first five and way you think about your matchup is really different.
For sure.
Um, and I think like there can be a tendency to want to build towards like a more toolboxy kind of style in open list. Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. Like having answers for all the matchups that you're um, expecting to face in the tournament. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. We got some chat. Carl says, I lost a game due to that. I didn't start Fade Away because I saw Polarity Mage. He didn't start Polarity Mage. I very much should have started Fade Away and got blown out. If closed, I had a chance.
I've had that exact thought, like starting to think of using illusion more and like running fade away in my first five, but then like thought that same thing. Like if I see an open list, they have polarity mage. Well, I'm not going to be running fade away in case
Mm-hmm.
they do start that polarity mage. Then I'm just ruined.
Yeah. Yeah. But then and I think too that there's a bit of like, I think all the mind games with an open list first five are like front loaded, like before the game even starts. Like you're going through all this stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, like what do I pick? What do I counter? What do I just should I? And then with closed list, there's a lot of mind games throughout the game. Um, One thing I love about closed list is that it allows you to bluff. I love bluffing. I'm a Netrunner player. I love throwing people off. And it's really fun when they don't know what your list is, but they see the charm die, you know. You know what's in your hand. You don't have a golden veil, but you meditate up the golden like to the charm power die anyway. Like you play a knight down and then you meditate up to the charm power, and they're just sitting there like, does he have the golden veil? Like that right there would never happen in an open list.
Hmm.
They either know you have it or they don't. Or they can at least, I mean, they may still have to guess whether it's in your hand. I mean, you could still bluff that, but they will know whether or not it's a possibility. Um,
Right.
so I really like that a lot.
Oh, John also commented, it's interesting how much variance is introduced just by the first five mechanic, since you can basically lose the game round one if you guess badly. And I think that's very true. Like a lot of games can be said to like you either win or lose round one if you like just first five badly or just in a really bad position can't recover. Um, there's some games where it's like, oh, we kind of like ended off in the like middle ground. Like some person maybe like a little have the advantage there, but like yeah, games can just be like decided round one depending on how those first fives go.
It can be, yeah. And I think that's maybe sums up a bit like the big differences between open and closed is like open, it's going to be a lot more fair, I think. There's going to be less chances for you to get a blowout win or loss. It evens the playing field a lot. It allows you to think critically about your choices before round one, and round one is like in this game is very, very important. It can decide the trajectory of a match really easily. So I think open list has the pro of being like very fair, very strategy heavy, even playing field at the expense of losing a little bit of the excitement and having a lot of like analysis paralysis and like kind of um, difficulty with like picking a first five before the game starts. Whereas
Mhm.
closed list, there is a lot more variance. It is a lot more explosive and like kind of crazy chaotic, but that also brings a lot of excitement. That's not always there in open list. So
Yeah, with the excitement and mind games, like another fun thing to do is like just like include uh two of a card in your deck because like if you drop like
yep.
the widows and get hit them with widows, then you meditate your second and only other one in your deck.
Hmm.
They still have to consider, oh, what if they are running that third one? They have to play around it the whole rest of the game, like worried
Yep.
about if they play widows here when I kill this unit, it would just be devastating.
Yeah, it is fun. Carl again saying kind of similar with body inversion and owl. Like if the owl player doesn't start owl because of body inversion, the body inversion player can blow themselves out. In close, that wouldn't happen. Yeah, and
Yeah.
three-eyed owl is a whole other conversation that we didn't write notes for, but it does kind of exacerbate all the things about closed lists that like the high variance openings. You have to build around owl in any list. You have to, um, because of how devastating it can be if you don't have a good answer for it.
Mhm.
And in closed lists, that's just even more. It's even more potent because you don't know for sure whether it's in the list. That one of charmed eye could be call to action or redirect or whatever. It could be Ruby Cobra. You don't know. But
Yeah, but then with them just having that charmed eye across from you, it's like, well, in case they're running out, got a plan for it.
yeah, for sure. Carl says the issue I have with open list is that there isn't much excitement in Ashes as is. Ashes is all slow math, which I love, but the diversity is lacking. Yeah, I think for
Hmm,
me,
makes
after
sense.
3 seasons of Shuffle Bus and the Invitational, uh, I'm taking a break from Shuffle Bus. I didn't register for season 6 or the Winter Qualifier. Um, and I'm playing in Ashes International League instead, and playing First Five League casual, which is also closed. Um, I just needed a little bit of a break from the brain burning of open list, and I think even though I have had some serious blowout losses in AIL, they've been really fun games, and it's just nice to just have like kind of a lean back game instead of a lean forward game every once in a while.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, had been feeling like that too, like close list, like really for me at least I leaned into more like playing it casually and like playing decks I hadn't played too much, but just have like a really fun time playing. And it's like
Yeah,
still going to play really like competitively with it, but like I'm not going to be like, oh, I gotta bring like this top tier deck for each like matchup that I'm going into.
That's a good point too. Like you get to change your list and close lists because there's no checking to make sure beforehand. Um, so it's nice to be able to play a competitive format while also being able to switch things up. Or if you're like me, I played the same two lists throughout all of AIL. I kind of treated AIL as like my testing grounds for this Herald list and for my Rin list. And it was fun to like just make small little changes and adjustments. Like, you know what? That card wasn't super good. That Reflections of Water, no, I don't need that. I needed something else, and just be able to make that change. Whereas you're kind of locked in, and it can feel a little bit oppressive if you make a bad deck building decision early in the, or at the beginning of Shuffle
Yeah.
Bus, and you're just stuck with it.
Yeah, I felt that like in my first shuffle bus, I like didn't bring that great of a deck, and then I like noticed a lot of weaknesses in like the first and second rounds, and I was like, well, I'm stuck with this the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's led me to be like, okay, I need to test my decks more going into it, so I don't have that like remorse of like, oh, I should have like had card X instead of card Y or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Nick Green. I don't think diversity is lacking across all formats, especially closed, but in general, Ashes is more chess-like as it's not about big RNG momentum swings.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, for sure.
I
That's
definitely feel like it's a lot like chess. Like there's there's like small bits of RNG like when you meditate or like if you don't get a power side when you need it, but it's very minimized and you can control it if you want to when deck building too, like we said with call or other like dice fixing cards.
yeah. Uh, I think the fact that there is so little RNG in this game makes the RNG that is in it feel more impactful. Um, so yeah, but I agree with you. I mean, it's definitely it's one of the great strengths of this game is that you can go into it with a game plan knowing that you can you can start it, you can be on your way, and you can have that first five and have that game plan and play it, and that's really good feeling. There's really no other game, no other card game that lets you do that. Um,
Hmm.
it's really cool. John says, "Yeah, the worst feeling in Shuffle Bus is realizing week two that your deck is bad and you have four more rounds to play." Yep.
Had that happened, yep.
More Nick says the more 0x units, Cobra, Owl, Orchid, Ember Root out there, the more that I like body inversion in general. Yeah, I think body inversion is really great. I'm also kind of an illusion fanatic. I really think illusion's way better than people give it credit for. But you do have to have the spellboard slots, and I think the issue is that a lot of the top tier um Phoenixborn only have three, and it's really hard to justify giving up a third book for a utility ready spell like that. Um,
Hmm.
but Aerodel can do it probably.
I think that's another reason like Odette does so well. It's like, oh, the more X2s or O
Hmm.
O2 units that come out, it's like, oh, Odette stock just rises even more because if they're running a lot of them, Odette just comes out and wipes them out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we hit the main topic. I think. Well, I'll take some questions from chat if anyone has any, and then we'll probably wrap this up here in a few. If anyone has anything, feel free to pop in and ask about. So, I actually I didn't think about the comparison between Kyla's Odette and Mayoni until we started recording, and I was like,
Hmm.
"Wait a second, this is basically like the same thing, isn't it? It's just a little different flavor." Um,
Hmm.
what do you think? How do you think? Well, let me rephrase this. What do you think about this sort of style of deck that is summon a big unit get it even bigger, and then protect it with a million different protection tools until you can just swing like twice and win. Essentially bypass. But it's currently, if you count Kyla's deck and you say, okay, that's kind of a similar style to Mayoni, that's 4 shuffle bus wins with this style of deck.
Yeah, that's crazy because I used to think like going all in on one like isn't that great of a strategy, but yeah, Mayoni's won 3 times, and then Odette winning with like a similar strategy with massive growth and like swing in. It's like so it's definitely like one of the best decks that
Yeah.
you can see.
So how do you think we fight that? Like this is clearly this I think is the archetype that has emerged as like one of the best competitive decks you can take.
Hmm.
Um like how do you get through all those golden veils and first I've somehow lucked out and I've never had to play against Mayoni in a competitive event. And I have no idea how to do it.
Just got to keep killing the snake, find out ways to do that. Yeah, I don't know. I slotted in redirects in my list, hoping that
Oh
would
yeah.
help. But then when massive growth got dropped on me, didn't have it in hand. So I was like, well, my tech my tech isn't winning it here for me.
Yeah. John says an open list. I feel like you build more to cover the field and include lots of text slash sideboard cards. I would agree with that. And closed
Yeah.
lists, do you deck build more for consistency and include fewer one of cards? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was thinking that, yeah, I tend to build either like 3x or 1x cards in a an open list just so that there's the 1x cards so they're like they don't know what I'm going to first 5, but then 3 of a card just so I still have consistency in my deck for like the control and removal pieces I need. But
Hmm.
with closed lists, just like I was saying earlier with like bluffing and stuff, I run more 2 of cards just so they don't know what to expect in my deck.
Yeah. I think the thing with closed lists is that you can have some really high synergy first fives in it. Um, that can be more easily disrupted in open. So for me, like I'm lately I've been playing a bit with like creepers and like some fallen stuff and uh I just think that it's a little bit easier to get away with these decks that have a lot of you kind of set up for a singular game plan. It's a big setup early on. Um if any one of those pieces are knocked out of place, it just kind of falls apart. In open list, it's just so much easier to punish that than in closed. Um, wow,
Hmm.
chat's exploding.
Starting
Uh,
to go.
million stallion explosive growth decks out there. Yeah, that seems to be, and I think part of that is that a lot of people have reported having good success with Auric and Stallion, and everyone's wanting to figure out how to play Auric right now. Um, there's a lot of Auric and Stallion going
Yeah,
on in the.
it's everyone's pet project trying to make them work.
Yep. I agree. You can dig into the 3x more in the closed and go all in on your idea rather than have to beat every archetype. Yeah, for sure. It's just more experimental in general, I think. Um, you have first a Mayoni deck in Shuffle Bus before, but not a Snake one. It was my Mayoni mount deck. Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was fun. I don't like. Yeah, that's a whole different story though. I really wonder why Odette, Xander, Echo, Lulu players don't want Magic Siphon. Not worrying about Golden Veil is big. At worst, it's a secondary win con. You want to talk about that a little bit? I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of insight on
Uh,
Magic Siphon.
no, that's a very good point because yeah, you can if you're worried about the golden veil in their hand, if you have magic siphon, you just turn down the charm power and then you can play any removal that you have. So it can really like mess them up, and then you can still get your game plan off. I did run Magic Siphon in my Xander list in season 2. I didn't run it with that mindset that Carl had there. It was more for if I run against a mill deck, but that's definitely something that's worth like taking a look at so you can get off your big um, unique cards and not have to worry about Veil.
Yeah. I think the I think the problem with Magic Siphon in general is just uh, eating up a first 5 slot is hard. Um, just spending first 5 slot on dice fixing in general, even if it's offensive, I think it's still it's a hard sell. So what
Mhm.
you end up doing is like if you want to lean into the secondary win con aspect of it, you're probably running 3. That's a lot of deck slots to commit to a card that you could draw in mid game and it doesn't do anything for you. Um so you're kind of in a tricky spot there. Do you run 1? Do you run 3? Do you first 5 it or not? I think there's a lot of there's just a lot of variance in including it.
So I have started running Magic Siphon in um lists that like, some mill decks are just like
Mhm.
pivot secondary win conditions to do that instead of call upon the realms. And yeah, I don't first 5 it typically.
Mhm.
I'll start something that's more like proactive. Um and then if I draw into it and if I have the dice to use it at the end of the round, then I'll use it.
Yeah.
And it's it's been pretty successful for me so far.
Cool.
But yeah, it takes that like more investment and um yeah, you're still like hoping you get it, and then if you don't, like it could hurt. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
I agree. It could be hard to like want to first 5 that.
Carl's original question was, I wonder why Odette, Xander, and Echo don't want it. I think the big thing there is just it's the third spellboard slot. Like
Hmm.
3 spellboard is just so tight for
Yeah.
to try and include like a tech piece like that. Still waiting on the Vicky versus Rin Mill exhibition CT. I need to build that Rin Mill deck. I need to get on that. Let's see. Or do you run 2 of them? Yeah, it's I th- personally I think if you're playing a Phoenix Born with a fourth or probably more likely a fifth spellboard slot, running a 2 of a ready spell is actually not that big of a deal. It's actually kind of nice. You get the flexibility of it. You know you're going to draw into it eventually. You're most likely going to see it mid game, but you're not like going all in on it to try and find it early, and you can just throw it into your spell board. You don't have to worry about whether or not you have a slot for it. Um, I personally, I really like sometimes just throwing in extra books in PBs that have big spell boards and just like surprise mid game, I got like even more going on that I can spend my resources on. But the issue I think with Mayoni is in open is that if you want to just counter her, you need all the removal, redirect, reflection type cards, but then you're just a gatekeeper and lose to other decks. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, and Carl follows up exactly that. There have been a few times I question how do I beat this as the Mayoni player, but then I come up with the first 5 where I may not win, but it poses the question back: how do they beat me?
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. Yep. I think Mayoni asks the "How do you beat me?" question better than almost any other PB in the
Yeah,
game.
because it's like, yeah, how do you reduce me to zero, do 20 damage to me before I
20
get
life.
my snake game plan off?
20 life, man. Yeah.
20 life dealing with a 4 life snake each round.
For 2
Man.
dice. For 2 dice. It's crazy. Um yeah. It's tough. I think Mayoni is probably still going to be the deck to beat for a little bit. But that said, we do have new Phoenixborn coming out soon, Illusion and Divine time decks. And who knows what they have in store? It could be that they just offer um, just the right answer to Snake, or maybe ways to overwhelm the Snake. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. It'll
Yeah,
be interesting to see if there's any like snake tech cards there
yeah.
that are included.
I think I would expect some, you know, like reaction stuff with illusion, spin down, or whatever. But I do know that if it's divine, they have the stranglehold on overkill right now. So if we see more overkill, maybe that's the way. You just push through damage through the
Mhm.
guilders, You just run over those mice.
That could be. Then you're just plinking away at that 20 health though, man.
It's a lot of health. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm good on calling it. It's been about an hour and 11. You think we're good?
Yeah, I think that was solid.
No, solid.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm out of my beverage, so.
Perfect timing there.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the second episode of First Five Live. Um, we just started up. Real quick announcement before we leave. We just started up First Five League. Um, Basically, what it is, it's a drop in, drop out at any time casual league on the Ashes community Discord. All you have to do is hop into the First Five League channel and just type exclamation point FFL space join, and you're in. We will pair you up every Friday during First Five Fridays with an opponent. You do not have to play on Friday. You can play, basically schedule a match anytime within a week. And so it's way more flexible. If you've ever wanted to join First Five Fridays and you just haven't had the like the Friday nights off, you haven't had the opportunity to, this is a great way to do that. And we will make sure to pair you up with somebody who is playing on the same format as you or whatever. But anyway, it's a great way to play Ashes casually and get into the game, so I highly recommend it. We're going to have some really cool prizes for it as well, including some like hand painted art from Lizzie, one of our great community members, and a custom Aztec-y background from Impossible German. So yeah, check that out for sure. Shuffle Bus Season 6 winter qualifiers underway. Shuffle Bus is streaming matches and talking about the meta and stuff. Be sure to check out their Twitch channel. And is there anything else like going on right now? Did I miss anything?
I think that covered the stuff that
Okay.
we missed in news at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we have some spoilers to talk about before next episode in a couple weeks or something. We'll see.
Or we'll just come up with something else if
Yeah,
nothing else comes out.
we'll figure it out. So,
Hmm.
all right, man. Well, thanks for doing this podcast with me again, Phil.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, everyone who was involved in the chat. It was nice reading and then talking with you guys
For sure.
on here about that.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right, we'll catch you guys later. See you next time.
See
Bye.
you guys.
Okay, it's ended.